No.
Go.
All right, well, now that we've seen a short slideshow about our father, I want to say a few words about him. I'm Norman, Stan's son, and we're so happy to be with all of you on this incredible occasion, my father, Stanley Cohen's 80th birthday. You may be looking at Stanley and asking yourself, what is his secret? After all, we all know he smoked for the first 50 years of his life. He never denied himself liquor, and he would consider dessert to be a rabbinical requirement. I believe, personally, that the secret to Stan's longevity is this. Dulce. This is dulce. If you don't know what this is, I'll explain it very basically. It's a red algae that grows on the northern coast of the Atlantic Ocean. And
Light on your face. There you go.
I believe it's the chief export of St. John, New Brunswick.
I thought Stan was the chief expert.
It's a nice red color. We'll pass it around. You can have a little taste. And I've got a couple packets of it. There you go. Let's see. Here's another one. Take a little taste or a whiff. I don't know if any of you read in the newspaper. There was an island in Greece they discovered last year where they recently discovered that people there live to be about 110 years old because all they drink is olive oil, really. And St. John is kind of like that, except with old Jews. And I believe the dulce really is the reason. We know that for Proust he had his Madeleine. Stanley had dulce. This is the bitter, salty taste of survival. It's really like Canadian matzah. Bread of our affliction. When you taste it, you'll see. I remember growing up, my dad would come back from St. John with a bag of this stuff, a sort of greasy brown paper bag, crumpled in there, and he'd pull out these weedy clumps of it and stuff it in his mouth. It was something to believe. But when you try this stuff, you'll see that the one characteristic of it is that it's tough. This stuff is tough. And so were my dad's ancestors. They got off the boat. It's tough, like your ancestors. This is all on tape. You'll see it all later.
Oh, this is good.
They got off the boat in this industrial Canadian city.
Dirty.
And they got off in St. John. They probably got off because they didn't have the money to go all the way to New York. And they looked around and they said, you know what? It's not so bad here. At least we're not being beaten by Cossacks. And they've got all this red stuff growing on the rocks, and it's edible, so we'll stay. So they ate dulce, and they stayed, and they prospered. Stan's grandfather sold scrap metal. His own father sold suits. He played basketball at night. They were part of a compact Jewish community. My father and his sister, Ann Ruth, their generation, they were the ones that were destined to go out into the wider world, and Stanley possessed a deep intelligence as well as an innate curiosity that led him to a career in journalism in New York and then Montreal. So my father is Canadian, in case any of you didn't know this. I don't know if it's a secret. And I've always sort of loved the fact that we're half Canadian on my dad's side. It gives us the air of being slightly foreign, a little bit different. And that's kind of the father that Stanley was. A bit different than other dads. But I remember visiting other kids' houses, and their fathers might say hello very briefly and then go back to watching their football game or whatever. But when my friends came over, they were greeted with a torrent of questions. How are your parents? How are your grandparents? What are you doing for a living these days? And mind you, they were 10 years old. But my friends always thought he was an interesting person. We were always embarrassed by what we saw as too much prying into our lives, too much of a persistent yentiness. But the fact is that Stanley was generally interested, and he still is. He has an interest in people, how they relate to each other, what they think. And for 80 years, he's maintained this vibrant curiosity about life in all its various colors and facets. My father has come very far in his life, as you've seen. He was born during the Great Depression, which most people don't realize in Canada lasted until the 1970s. He lived in New York in the 50s of abstract expressionism and Lenny Bruce and the Beats. And he survived Quebec separatism of the 60s. He arrived in Washington just in time for the Reagan Revolution. And much like Ted Cruz, he knew that the politically expedient thing would be to jettison his Canadian citizenship. He's survived 7 U.S. presidential administrations and has seen 9 secretaries of education deposed in bloodless coups. Or 10 maybe, I forget. But despite having come so far and lived through so much change, my father has always kept a very strong hold in tradition. His roots are very important to him. He would always call his family on weekends and see them on any possible occasion. And wherever he's lived, he's donated his time to giving back to the Jewish community and other communities. And as you saw in this slideshow, fashions may change, but my father has always remained true to himself.
Give the man a hug.
Oh, give the man a hug. I gotta do that.
Anybody else? Nobody else?